Hi friends, it's Jackie. I'm in a funny position at my dining room table and it's nighttime and it's raining and I'm making pie dough. And I wanted to make this video under imperfect circumstances so that you guys could sort of see my hands at work to follow along with the recipe when you make your delicious pies for Thanksgiving. So I'm gonna stand up now and you're just gonna hear my disembodied voice and watch my hands. So to make pie dough, you just need a couple of ingredients. So first is 1.5 cups of whole wheat flour. I've got whole wheat pastry flour here in the bowl. If you can get pastry flour, that's great. If not, whatever you have is gonna be great. And then you wanna add like a little pinch of salt, all right? And then about a tablespoon of sugar, although it doesn't have to be perfect, I'm just sort of using my hands, right? And we're gonna add that to the flour and then give it all a good mix so it's all mixed up nice. Next thing that we're gonna do is cut up 1 stick of butter into cubes. So this should be as cold as possible. I just spent like 15 minutes fiddling around with this camera setup, so the butter is not as cold as possible. Not ideal, but also not the end of the world. You know, some people, they cut the butter in advance into cubes and then they put it in the freezer so that it gets really super duper cold. And you can do that if you want to do that. I don't really feel like I have the time or energy for that kind of thing. So we're just gonna kind of do a quick cut of the butter like that. All right, so see, they're kind of like little cubies like that, okay? And I'm gonna add those cubes to my flour bowl. And the thing about pie dough is if you wanna have like a really flaky pie crust, the key to that is to make sure that you have sort of like streaks of butter throughout. So and the way to do that is to have cold butter and to work really fast because we don't want the heat from our hands to like melt the butter into there. So I just kind of tossed the butter cubes in with the flour, right? So they're coated. And now I'm gonna work really fast and just kind of use my fingers and like pinch through, right? Like that. So I'm trying to sort of break up and like pinch the butter in between so it breaks up into like pea-sized pieces and kind of starts to incorporate with the flour. All right, so ideally I would be doing this with 2 hands, but I want you guys to see it. So I want to work really fast so that we're keeping everything cold. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect, and you kind of want some nice big hunks of butter in there. Those are gonna create those sort of like streaks of fat, and that's what's gonna give the pie those like flaky layers. So I'm gonna keep going. I see a few pieces that are just a little bit bigger than I would like for them to be in an ideal world. As I'm doing this, maybe one of my lovely assistants who's hanging around the house could bring me some flour, please, so that I can do my pie dough step 2. I got almost everything set, but not quite. Okay, so this looks about good to me. You know, we've got mostly small pieces here. Not, you know, it's all kind of like flecked throughout. And yeah, I think that's gonna look good. So now, next step is to pour in some ice cold water. Thank you. So I wanna do a 1/4 cup of ice cold water. I just took some water, put some ice cubes in it. Now it's ice cold. All right, and I'm gonna take that and pour it in. And then again, just like before, I wanna work really fast and incorporate that water into the dough to kind of hydrate it all. And so you see I'm kind of just using my fingers, and like once it gets to the point where it feels like, oh, I can't do anymore, then you can sort of start to like smush it in, and you'll find that the dough will really incorporate quite quickly all of that water. So I'm just going, there we go. I'm kind of using the heel of my palm to smush that in. Wow, it's really raining out right now. I hope that it's cozy for you guys wherever you are. Okay, so that's it. So now I have some pie dough. Okay, kind of like this, right? And what I will do is just form it into a disc, kind of like this. And then I cover it in like beeswrap and stick it in the fridge. And you want to stick it in the fridge for an hour or two or a day or two. But we just want it to be nice and cold when we're working on it. Okay, so here's the pie dough. Again, it's not perfect. There's some little bits of flour, but that's okay. The most important thing is that I can sort of see little bits of the butter throughout, evenly throughout. So now let's pretend like 2 hours has gone by. And I will, at that point, take my cold pie dough out of the fridge, right? So here it is, magic. And yeah, with this one, you can really sort of see those little bits of butter throughout. So much better than the last one because the butter was cold. So again, you really don't want to take that butter out of the fridge too soon. So we've got our pie dough, okay? And the next thing to do is to flour your work surface. Because I'm trying to get a setup where you guys can really see what I'm doing, this is not an ideal situation, so I'm using my dining room table. It's gonna be kind of a pain in the neck to clean up, but that's okay. So plenty of flour on there, pie dough in the middle, right? And then plenty more flour on the top, okay? And I have my fancy rolling pin. Thank you, Mark, for this lovely rolling pin. And I'm gonna kind of start in the middle, right? And then push out in every direction, okay? And it doesn't have to be perfect. Like, I kind of get some craggly ends when I'm doing this, and that is no big deal because we'll be able to fix it as we go. And the thing is, I don't want it to stick to the table, so I'm gonna flip it every so often, right? And add more flour if needed, and then keep working, right? So I'm sort of starting from the center and working my way out around the dough like that. Okay. And so that's looking pretty good. I'm gonna do one more flip, I think. And as you can see, it's like craggly and it looks like, oh, it's falling apart. That's no good. But you know what? It is going to be fine when we get it ready to go. So what I can do now is like take some of these bits at the end of the dough and kind of stick them into the middle. So like right here, for example, I have a little crack. I'm just gonna take some of these bigger bits from the end and fill them in like that. So yeah, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect. You're still making your own pie crust, which that is, you know, a wonderful thing to give to your loved ones. So if it's not perfect, they're not gonna be like, oh, terrible, throw it away. They're gonna say, thank you so much for making this beautiful dessert. So that looks about good to me. And now it's just about kind of, yeah, like filling in all these cracks. So one thing that I can do is just kind of, take from the side, right? And smush them in like that. And, you know, depending on the pie that you're making, you don't want to have any of those juices kind of pour through into the bottom of your pie dish. So you really want to make sure that you don't have any holes. So I want to really go through and make sure that it's looking super good. And this is looking pretty good. So yeah, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm not a pastry chef. I'm sure there's people doing this better out there in the universe, but I would rather just kind of have something that's like not too fussy and also very delicious. So that's looking good. It's kind of even throughout. And so the next thing is to just put it in the pie dish, which I've got right here. And let's see if I can do it without having anything fall apart. Now, my mother has a really smart tip for rolling out the pie dough. She uses 2 pieces of waxed paper, so one on the bottom of the dough and one on the top. Apparently this is what my grandmother used to do. And then she can just roll it out in between those 2 pieces of waxed paper, and then you don't have to worry about it sticking to the table ever, which is very smart, but I don't know, I don't have any wax paper in my life. So I just kind of do it like this. And again, you know, it's not always perfect, but that's okay. So now it's kind of in there. And again, doesn't look like the most perfect thing in the world, but I'm just gonna kind of take from the top, right, to fill in any cracks or holes like that, like so. And I'm filling it up with a delicious filling. So it really just does not have to be perfect at all. And I think that that is looking pretty good. So now at this point, I can sort of like play around with my edges, right? You want to kind of clean those up. So we could use like a knife and kind of cut around them. You could use a fork and like make a cool little pattern throughout, or you can do a little fluting with your fingers. It's really up to you. So at this point, we have a serviceable pie crust, and now it just needs baking. So, oh my gosh, I almost just tipped over the most flour. That would have been horrible. So I'll come back down here and see you guys. So at this point, you just want to bake it. And there's generally two different ways to bake pie crust depending on the recipe. So the first is blind baking, and that's where you bake the shell without any ingredients in it. So if you were doing like a meringue or a frozen pie, that kind of thing, you'd want to have a cooked shell first. Or fruit pies that might have a lot of juice, sometimes you kind of cook them first a little bit. So you just preheat the oven to 350-ish and fill this with parchment paper, and then put dried beans or rice on top of the parchment paper to weigh everything down, and you cook it like that. And this way, when it's baking, you don't get any sort of bubbling in the crust and everything stays down. The other thing to do is to just fill it with your pie filling and put it in the oven. And I would recommend, before you do that, stick it in the fridge or the freezer to let it like cool up a little bit more again, so that we still have those nice little bits of butter. So this was a quick little tutorial about how I make a pie crust, and hopefully you guys are going to use this when you make the sweet potato pecan maple pie that is going to be next week's recipe. Perfect for Thanksgiving. Okay, so I hope everybody is cozy in the rain or wherever you are, and you're having a great night. See you all soon. Bye.